Welcome back. We have today with me Joshua Briones, who's the VP of Strategy and Pricing and Operations at Kyriba.
Yes.
Thank you very much for making time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. For everyone who doesn't know Kyriba, could you give us a brief overview of the company, what the company does, and also explain your role and your journey into pricing?
Sure. Kyriba is operates in the treasury management space. So anything and everything from cash management to payments management to financial transactions and risk management. So primary customer would be the treasurer, the CFO of an organization. And we operate globally. Obviously, there's treasurers and CFOs and in all organizations that have a need for our products at some level. I've been the VP of pricing since 2021, so a year and a half now. And it was actually a newly created role. And the primary task of what we're doing is around the transformation of our packaging. Kyriba built obviously organically, and everything was a la carte, pieces and parts. I like to say a lot of Legos, right? And no Lego set. And so my role primarily has been how do we move away from a la carte into more of a good, better, best approach to packaging, to develop stickiness, to make simplification happen, the buyer experience, et cetera. And so that's really been the primary role. But the role also is all encompassing, right? It's your typical commercial role. It's discounting, it's thresholds, it's price book management, it's a little bit of sales enablement, it's working with products. So.
Yeah, I think that's always the exciting part about the sim space, that whenever you talk about pricing, it actually encompasses the entire product development piece and
Yeah.
the overall strategy and the revenue model as well. Um, just very curious from your perspective, what are some of the key challenges in kind of building those good, better, best packages and other pricing challenges? What were the key challenges that you encountered in the company so far?
Yeah, I think there's a few. One would be just the market dynamic, right? So just really understanding how consumers behave,
Hmm.
how they want to purchase, what their purchasing patterns were in the past, and as the company had kind of developed their packaging or their pricing model to begin with, everything, like I said, was a la carte. And so now it's a matter of trying to figure out what gets bought with what,
Hmm.
and how do you actually build a package that makes sense for not all of your customers, because nothing's ever going to fit everybody, but for kind of that 80-20 rule. And how do you make sure that you're fitting the right amount of customers into each package, because you've got a baseline of customers that you're eventually going to have to try to at least roll
Right.
or migrate in. And so it becomes imperative to understand and to make sure that not everybody's falling in the biggest package, because you want room for growth, you want room for upsell.
Exactly.
And so it's just keeping all of those things in mind, that make it very complex to really develop it. And then think the second piece is just that you have a lot of voices, right? You have a lot of really good experience within organizations in general that are often the voice of the customer, and you have to be able to listen to them, right? But you also have to apply data to it, and you have to apply metrics to it, and so it's kind of that balancing act of really hearing the voice of the customer, understanding what the field is dealing with, understanding the competition, understanding where sorry, understanding where the how things relate together, um, and kind of pulling that balancing act, to present what the final would be. Um, I would say the other big challenge is just making sure that all of your leadership is on board. I think that's been with all of my roles in any transformational effort, is just ensuring that you've got the right level of support at the top. Because at the end of the day, really, that's who your stakeholders are. If they've bought into a pricing transformation project, if they've bought into this is where we need to go as an organization to develop or to have some commercial excellence, then you're going to be a lot better off if you're kind of than if you're the lone
Right.
soldier trying to develop something, because at least you have their support and they're pushing, and maybe they're going to push back on certain things, but at least they're helping to pull the rest along who are typically digging their feet in.
Yeah. I was about to ask, I mean, you mentioned voice of customer, so you have to listen to your actual customers. You use a lot of data. You work with the leadership. How about the sales reps? boots on the ground who actually have to sell the products in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're critical because they're the ones that are actually doing the quoting motion, they're
Right.
doing the selling, they've got years of experience often of how all these things work. And in our situation, been it's been interesting to see each sales rep, because there isn't predefined packages, they're typically building their own, right?
Mm-hmm.
They all have their
Yeah.
mode of operation. They're like, well, for this type of customer, these are the things I put together to make, to give them what they need, right? And for this type of customer, this is what I put together. And so now you're having to kind of see what everybody does on their own, but then you're trying to pull together standardized packaging, right? That's supposed to fit multiple use cases, because you don't if you moved from 2,000 a la carte pieces and parts and you had 50 different packages, right, you're no better,
Yeah.
right? You really want simplification. And so listening to the sales reps and trying to kind of understand, how do you guys do this and how does the customer receive it? And then on top of that, layering in the analytics piece of, well, you may position it that way, but our metrics tell us that the majority of our customers who sign contracts and actually pay us actually don't buy it that way, right? We may have gone out that way, but at the end they redline those few products, and that means that that's not the buying
Interesting.
pattern,
Yeah.
right?
Are there any kind of learnings that you had along the way? I would probably call them pricing bloopers. So things that you tried out and they didn't quite work out the way that you intended them to work. Yeah, because yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, I think in my career, there's been a lot of challenging things. I think one of them, years ago, I was tasked in a role to do a number of pricing increases, and
Hmm.
it was really, the organization had brought me in to be kind of the director of the commercial center of excellence. They really wanted to build that practice up, and one of the pillars was is we have thousands of customers that are paying the same prices that they paid 10 years ago, and we know that this is a lot of low hanging fruit. Like, how do we actually go about getting this? And I think one of the things that I did wrong that I wish I could go back was that I hadn't learned yet, to really value what the sales team was experiencing in the field. And I was pushing it from more of a corporate level of, you need to go get the pricing increase, right? You've got to go get it. You've got to go get it. And I was looking at competition. I was looking at all the other variables, but I really wasn't hearing kind of that emotional
Right.
connection. And it's not to say that they were wrong or right. It's more so that they were heard, right? Because once I kind of cut that relationship off of, he's not hearing me, then they dug their heels in even more, right?
Right.
And that made the execution very challenging. It made, they're going to push back as much as they can. They're going to fight. They're going to do everything they can to not go out and tell that customer that their price is going up by 10%. And the opposite would have been that the better way for me to handle it would have been for me to bring them along the
Bring them along
journey,
the right.
right?
Yeah.
Like,
Hmm.
hey, help me understand where we can get price, where do we have leverage and where do we not, right?
Yeah.
Versus me just looking at it from my lens and not from the sales lens. I think that was probably one of the biggest things,
Yeah.
big lesson learned for me.
Yeah, it's typically, I think, helpful to talk to reps, get their perspective,
Absolutely.
and then use data to either bust some myths or use those
Yeah.
insights. You talked about price increases, and I think that's the word of the hour. We're in an inflationary environment. How does the current inflation actually impact your business, and how does it impact pricing in your case?
As far as impacting our business directly, right? I think it's just like every other SaaS business, right? There's rising costs. There's the kind of your typical thing. I think the biggest question is kind of where are companies, whether it's my company or anybody's companies, like, where are you at from a contractual perspective? Because most companies typically have some sort of clause in their contract which enables some sort of CPI increase, and they typically tie it to CPI. But we've gotten very accustomed over the years that CPI is 2.5%, and everybody's okay with
Yeah.
that. And now all of a sudden that we're at an 8 or 9%, even 10%, it becomes like, oh well, Are we going to really do that? And it's, and my question becomes as well, we have a contract that says we're able to do that. And so I think you have to look at it from a strategic perspective is like, are we going to adhere to the contract, right? Or are we going to do just a gimme for the customer? And so right now, I think that's the biggest challenge is
Right.
this whole battle between, hey, we're contractually okay to do this. All we have to do is notify them. Maybe it's a 30-day period or whatever. But then you've also got the side of the business that's saying like, if we go out with a 10% pricing increase, like our customer's going to leave. And it's a balancing act. How do you balance that emotional side of it versus the actual practical or tactical side of things in order to go achieve that? And then the other question is um, one of the things that I've started to push forward is how do we look at the pricing increase to not just tie it to CPI, but also bring in a little bit of value elements. And for us, we've got the transformational aspect because we're transitioning into a new packaging model. So, is there a way to tie all this together
Right.
to migrate a customer over to not just increase their price, but to migrate them over to the new pricing? So, there's a number of things, and I think that's I'm sure that a lot of companies are looking at is like, how do I go out with this pricing increase without just saying like I'm just pounding my fist saying, well, CPI is blank because there does need to be some value. And I think you also have to be cognizant of what competition is doing. Or is competition going out with a 10% pricing increase as well? And are your products commoditized or very price sensitive, right?
Right.
So there's a number of things to think through when you're considering the actual increase itself.
So we briefly talked about price increases and kind of the option to camouflage increases through a differentiated offering. Are there any other ways in the SIM space that a company can, yeah, I don't want to say get around a price increase, but make it a more digestible maybe for some customer segments?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I think you have opportunities to look at, is your pricing structure the right pricing structure, right? Is it volume based when it should be something else? Are you selling, users and should you more so shift to more of a module focus or vice versa,
Right.
right? Are you very modular focused and the value is actually in the users? So just kind of shifting that focus. Also, just revamping the offering in general sometimes. And that takes a lot of working with product and product management to say, what's our strategy and roadmap as to how all of our products kind of come together? Are we moving more towards a kind of a general platform, or are we still going to keep with these 4 or 5 different types of
Right.
siloed platforms? And is there a way to more do like an enterprise license, right? And having an offering that is more encompassing of everything for our very large customers, and that oftentimes can create a big opportunity. Um, in one of my past roles, one of the big things that we did was we tied it to stickiness. So we looked at our customers that were high volume versus low volume, and for that particular product, the higher volume customers were the ones that were actually more likely to leave if you were to do a pricing increase because they were giving you so much. And what we found is that we could take our smallest sector of customers and increase their price by 20, 30, 40%
Well, mm,
because it was very expensive for a small customer to leave,
okay.
and they didn't want to spend that money to go and just move their 100 units per month to another one. So they just took the pricing increase. And so you could actually make up on the lower volume, which is often unusual. But you've got to be creative like that. You've got to really understand the market and how customers decide between competitors. And also just looking at the stickiness of what the alternatives are in order to make some of those work.
Makes sense. You mentioned in the beginning that it's really important to bring the leadership along with you and get their buy-in. How do you get their buy-in? And maybe on a broader scale, how do you actually convince them of investing in pricing and monetization strategy and investing in the team and have the support that you need to do all those things?
Yeah, I think that's a critical aspect. One of the things that I talk about often is just corporate alignment in general, right? So your leaders in the C-suite, they have goals. They have corporate goals, whether they're private or they're public, right? They have these metrics they're trying to get to, right? And a lot of times what it's growth, right? It's EBITDA. There's a number of things that they're looking at. And I think the best way that I found to get them on board with pricing strategy and commercial strategy in general is to tie your pricing goals and your go to market goals to actually what they're trying to achieve,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so it's like, hey, we're looking to grow. And it's like, well, pricing can be a lever to grow. It's not just new customers, new logos. It's not just, farming our renewals. It's not just, more scope for a customer. How much price can we get out of the customer? How much can we leverage that? Do we have the ability to go after that? And then, other corporate alignment things are, how do they feel about the buyer experience? A lot of companies these days are now launching customer success groups. They're launching client, the chief client officer, the client experience, right? And being able to tag on to that from a pricing or commercial perspective is critical, because a lot of times pricing isn't just your price. Sometimes it's your quoting motion.
Right.
Sometimes it's slow to get an approval through.
Right.
Sometimes it's all the back and forth and negotiating, right? And if you're offering value in simplifying that and making the buyer experience and the client experience more smooth, then it once again aligns to their goals. And so I've just often found that if you can really look at their goals and just fit how do these things fit into what they're trying to do from a corporate perspective, it goes a long way, because then they feel like, okay,
Yeah.
this is moving the needle. This is helping us to achieve what we want to do. It's when it's completely misaligned that they're kind of like this. I don't really care what you do, or they're just not interested,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so, um,
And I assume also making the business case, right?
yeah, you're making the business case,
Mm-hmm.
and you're proving your value.
Right.
And
Exactly.
your second question is like, how do you get them to invest? And I think it's all about proof, right?
Right.
It's all about showing the value that it's creating. It's that value creation mindset. It's how um, one of the funniest things years ago, I did this pricing increase program over like a 4-year period, and we got like $175 million over this 4-year period. And I'll never forget the CFO. He said in one of the year end meetings at the annual QBR, he's like, man, the pricing team actually was the biggest sales engine in the whole company, right? Because they made more than any of like our organic growth, and it was all through price. And it completely justified reinvesting. It's like, man, if we got that with 6 people, like what could we get with
Yeah.
8 people going out and doing all these, pricing increases and metrics, and looking at customers and where their opportunity is and white space and all those things. So there's a lot of opportunity. I think it's just proving that value little by little, and ultimately challenging the status quo.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that your leaders, especially if you've got um, kind of the change agent type leaders, they're very interested when you kind of come in and you question, like, well, why are we doing it that way? Have we thought of packaging it differently? Have we thought of going to market a little differently? Have we thought of enabling a little bit our story? What's our story, et cetera? And just kind of bringing a holistic view to go to market. A lot of times they're a lot more apt to, hey, these guys kind of, they're helpful to
Right.
us, right? They're helping us.
There. I think there are many companies that only dream of having 6 to 8 people in their pricing department, and they're not there yet. They wish to get there. If you maybe think back at the beginning of your career in the pricing area, what advice would you give your younger self? Maybe one tip or two of what to do or what not to do in order to make a career in pricing and help an organization in the pricing area.
That's a tough question. um, I would say I'll start with what to do. I would say stick with it, because I think
Mhm.
that customer or companies are, I liken it to like the 80s when it was like the personnel department, and then it moved to HR, and now it's like people success,
Right.
right? I think that companies are doing that now. It used to be like, oh, the cost manager, and now it's moving into pricing as a strategy, and now you've got chief commercial officers and chief value officers. And so I say stick with it, right? Because it's one of those things, like, keep going. It's a niche world, it's a niche role, and it's extremely critical. And companies are getting more on board with having an actual team and a group that is really striving for commercial excellence and that wants to have that kind of holistic view. As far as things to avoid. Things I would do differently is I don't think I learned early enough in my career how important it was for me to know the product
Mm.
and how important it was for me to really understand how all of our products fit together. I was so focused on building models and building a price quote and getting an approval through. I didn't really even understand early in my career what are we selling. Like I knew it was XYZ product. I knew kind of what it was, but I didn't know how all the pieces fit together.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I could actually do that that really started to shift my mindset more into value
Exactly.
than just a number, right?
Right.
But I had to understand what our products do. And so now as I just recently started this role, and as I've started other roles, that's one of the first things I ask in the organization is, do you have like a product class that I can go sit to? Is there a new hire product training, or where can I learn about what we do? How can I grasp
Yeah.
how all these things fit together? Because right now they just look like SKUs to me. Like it just looks like a
Right.
bunch of parts,
Yeah.
and I don't know how they work, and I don't know what's valuable and what's not, and I can't put it into the mind of what the customer uses it for, and that exponentially makes you understand the value of it and how to price it and how to put it together. And without that, you're really going to struggle. You're not going to understand what's valuable and what's not.
Yeah. I think that's actually really a nice closing, because value is the exactly the opposite side of pricing. You need to understand the value of your products and services in order to price adequately. So this was super enlightening. Thank you so much
Yeah,
for
thank
making
you.
time
I
for
enjoyed
us.
it. Yeah,
It was a pleasure. And yeah, I'll see you around and
absolutely.
hope to see you all.